June 25th, 2009 changed everything. When Michael Jackson's heart stopped beating, his brothers and sisters were left holding secrets they'd carried for decades. Some of those revelations would defend him, others would shock the world, and a few would completely rewrite how we understood the king of pop. Let's talk about what the Jackson siblings finally admitted after Michael was gone. The first person to speak publicly was Jermaine. Standing outside UCLA Medical Center just hours after his brother's death, he could barely get the words out. His voice cracked as he confirmed what the world already feared. But what most people didn't catch was the guilt embedded in that statement. Jermaine later revealed he'd been trying to reach Michael for 8 months straight before his passing. 8 months of unreturned phone calls. 8 months of wondering if his younger brother had completely shut him out. In interviews that followed, Jermaine opened up about their complicated relationship during the Thriller era. He admitted something painful that had eaten at him for years. When Michael was preparing his 4th solo album with producer Clive Davis, Jermaine accused his brother of deliberately sabotaging his career. Michael had allegedly convinced Babyface and L.A. Reid, the producers Jermaine desperately wanted, to work on his projects instead. When Jermaine confronted him about it, Michael's response was cold and calculated. According to Jermaine, his brother simply said the producer would get over it. That revelation painted a different picture than the gentle, childlike Michael the public knew. It showed a cutthroat businessman who understood the industry's brutal nature. Jermaine kept that story quiet for years out of respect. But after Michael's passing, he felt the world needed to understand his brother's complexity. Janet Jackson, arguably the second most famous member of the family, took a different approach. She disappeared from public view almost entirely in the months following her brother's death. When she finally spoke, her admissions were heartbreaking. She confessed that she'd noticed changes in Michael during his final years but didn't push hard enough. She saw him getting thinner, noticed the exhaustion in his eyes, but convinced herself he was fine because he told her he was. The guilt in Janet's voice during her interview with Robin Roberts was palpable. She admitted that the Jackson family had a pattern of not confronting difficult truths directly. They'd grown up in a household where Joe Jackson's word was law, and questioning things wasn't encouraged. That pattern followed them into adulthood. Even when they sensed something was terribly wrong with Michael, none of them staged the intervention that might have saved his life. Janet also revealed something touching about their final conversation. Just weeks before his death, Michael had called her excited about the This Is It concerts. He told her these shows would be different from anything he'd done before. He wanted to prove he could still perform at the highest level. Janet said she could hear both excitement and desperation in his voice, a combination that haunted her after he was gone. LaToya Jackson's admissions were the most controversial and complicated. In the immediate aftermath, she made explosive claims on multiple talk shows. She stated publicly that she believed her brother had been murdered. She pointed fingers at the people surrounding Michael in his final days, suggesting a conspiracy to access his money and catalog. The family distanced themselves from these statements initially, calling them irresponsible and hurtful. But LaToya stood by her position. She revealed that Michael had told her directly, multiple times, that people were after his catalog. He'd said if anything happened to him, it wouldn't be accidental. LaToya admitted she didn't take these warnings seriously at the time. She thought her brother was being paranoid, another casualty of his isolated lifestyle and constant media scrutiny. After his death, those conversations were played in her mind endlessly. Years later, some family members quietly acknowledged that LaToya might have been onto something, even if her public approach was questionable. The circumstances surrounding Michael's death, the role of Dr. Conrad Murray, and the business dealings in his final months raised legitimate questions that the family still grapples with today. Rebby Jackson, the eldest sibling, rarely gave interviews. But when she did speak about Michael, she revealed tender moments the public never saw. She talked about how Michael would call her for recipes, how he'd ask her advice about raising children as a single parent. Rebby admitted she was one of the few people Michael trusted completely because she never wanted anything from him. She didn't need his money, didn't want his fame, and wasn't trying to revive her own career through his success. Rebby's most powerful admission came during a family interview years after Michael's passing. She confessed that the entire family had failed him by not standing up to Joe Jackson more forcefully when they were children. She acknowledged that the abuse Michael endured shaped everything that came after. His obsession with childhood, his struggles with self-image, his difficulty trusting people, all traced back to those formative years when none of his older siblings could protect him. Marlon Jackson spoke less frequently than his brothers, but his revelations carried significant weight. He admitted that during the Victory Tour in 1984, he could see Michael pulling away from the family. The youngest brother had outgrown the group in every measurable way. His solo success had eclipsed anything the Jacksons could achieve together. Marlon said there was jealousy among the brothers, though they tried to hide it. Watching their baby brother become the biggest star on the planet while they struggled for relevance created tensions that never fully healed. Marlon also revealed a conversation he had with Michael during the bad era. Michael told him directly that he felt trapped between two worlds. He loved his family but knew that staying too closely connected to them would hold back his artistic vision. The guilt Michael felt about that choice, according to Marlon, never went away. He compensated by buying his parents' houses, supporting various family members financially, and occasionally agreeing to projects he didn't want to do just to keep the peace. Tito Jackson, perhaps the most low-key of the brothers, made admissions that were surprisingly emotional. He talked about watching Michael practice the moonwalk for hours in their childhood home. Even back then, Tito said, there was something different about Michael's dedication. While the other brothers would goof off during rehearsals, Michael treated every practice session like a performance. That work ethic, Tito admitted, made the rest of them feel inadequate sometimes. Tito also spoke about the last time he saw Michael alive. They'd had a brief conversation about music, about the old days, about family. Tito said he'd wanted to tell his brother how much he admired him, how proud he was, but the words didn't come out. He assumed there would be other opportunities. That regret, he confessed, was something he'd carry forever. Randy Jackson, the youngest of the brothers, had perhaps the most complex relationship with Michael. He'd replaced Jermaine in the Jacksons, and always felt like he was living in the shadows of both brothers. After Michael's death, Randy admitted that he'd harbored resentment for years. He felt like Michael had abandoned the family once he achieved solo success. Randy acknowledged those feelings were unfair and rooted in his own insecurities, but they were real nonetheless. Randy also made shocking claims about Michael's business affairs in the months before his death. He alleged that people in Michael's inner circle had forged his brother's signature on documents. He suggested that Michael wasn't in control of his own decisions during that period. These allegations added fuel to the conspiracy theories LaToya had promoted. Though Randy's approach was slightly more measured, Jackie Jackson, the oldest brother, spoke about the weight of being the firstborn in such a famous family. He admitted that he'd always felt responsible for his younger siblings but was powerless to protect them from Joe's abuse or from the darker sides of fame. After Michael's death, Jackie revealed that his brother had confided in him about the 1993 allegations. Michael had been devastated not just by the accusations themselves, but by the fact that some people, even some family members, had questioned whether there might be truth to them. Jackie's most painful admission was about the settlement. He said Michael didn't want to settle the case but was advised by everyone around him that fighting it would destroy his career and his image. The decision to pay haunted Michael for the rest of his life because it made him look guilty to many people. Jackie wished he'd encouraged his brother to fight harder, to take the case to trial and clear his name completely, regardless of the cost. The siblings collectively admitted something else after Michael's passing. They acknowledged that they'd enabled his isolation to some degree. They'd respected his desire for privacy and his need to control his environment. But in doing so, they'd allowed him to surround himself with people who didn't have his best interests at heart. They'd watched as handlers, managers, and doctors replaced family members in Michael's inner circle. They'd seen it happening but convinced themselves that Michael was an adult who could make his own choices. This collective guilt manifested in how fiercely they defended him after the Leaving Neverland documentary premiered in 2019. The siblings came together in a way they hadn't in years. They appeared on talk shows, gave interviews, and used social media to push back against the allegations. Taj Jackson, one of Michael's nephews, became particularly vocal. He revealed that his uncle had been like a father to him and his brothers after their mother was murdered. The idea that Michael would harm children, Taj insisted, contradicted everything he'd witnessed firsthand. The siblings also admitted they'd kept certain things private to protect Michael's legacy. They'd agreed not to discuss the full extent of his painkiller dependency publicly. They'd chosen not to reveal details about his plastic surgeries or his struggles with vitiligo until absolutely necessary. They'd maintained a united front about his innocence regarding all allegations, regardless of their private doubts or questions. But perhaps the most significant admission came from Janet during a rare, candid interview. She acknowledged that the family had treated Michael as a commodity at times. When they needed money or career boosts, they'd leaned on him. She admitted that wasn't fair, and that the pressure they'd put on him, combined with the pressure from the entire world, had been crushing. Janet said if she could go back, she would have encouraged him to step away from everything, to disappear for a while, and just live as a regular person. Instead, they'd all participated in keeping him on the treadmill that eventually destroyed him. The siblings revealed that Michael had tried to prepare them for his death more than once. He'd made comments about not living to old age. He'd talked about his legacy and what he wanted people to remember. At the time, they dismissed these statements as Michael being dramatic or philosophical. Looking back, they wondered if he'd known on some level that his time was running out. Jermaine shared a particularly haunting detail. Michael had given him a box of personal items years before his death and told him to keep it safe. After Michael passed, Jermaine opened the box to find photographs, letters, and mementos from their childhood. It was as if Michael had been creating a time capsule of memories he wanted preserved. Jermaine admitted he still couldn't look through all of it without breaking down. The siblings also came clean about the family's financial situation and how it had complicated their relationship with Michael. Joe and Catherine had consistently struggled with money despite having children who'd sold millions of records. Michael had been the primary financial support for his parents and several siblings for decades. That created an uncomfortable dynamic where family members needed him but also resented that dependence. After his death, when the estate began generating massive revenue again, tensions emerged over the inheritance. Michael's will had been clear. His money went to his children and his mother, with nothing designated for his siblings. Some of the brothers and sisters admitted feeling hurt by that decision, even though they understood it. It confirmed what they'd suspected. Michael had separated himself from them financially just as he'd done artistically and personally. The siblings revealed that Michael had been planning a massive comeback beyond the This Is It concerts. He'd talked about new albums, about directing films, about building an entertainment empire that would outlast him. He wanted to prove he could still dominate the industry on his terms. His death cut short not just a concert series, but an entire second act he'd been designing. Perhaps most importantly, the siblings finally admitted they didn't fully understand Michael. Despite growing up with him, despite sharing the stage with him for years, he remained somewhat enigmatic to them. The Michael they knew as children had transformed into someone so famous, so scrutinized, so damaged by his experiences that he'd become almost unreachable. They'd lost their brother long before he died physically. In the years since his passing, the siblings have worked to preserve and protect his legacy. They've collaborated on documentaries, defended him against accusations, and tried to ensure his children maintain connections to the Jackson family. But they've also been honest about their regrets, their failures, and the complexity of loving someone who belonged more to the world than to them. The admissions from Michael's siblings paint a portrait of a family that loved him, failed him, needed him, and ultimately lost him. They reveal the human cost of extraordinary fame and the ways that talent, ambition, and dysfunction can coexist within a single family. Most of all, they show that even those closest to Michael Jackson spent years trying to understand a person who may have been unknowable. 15 years after his death, the siblings continue to process their grief publicly and privately. They've admitted their mistakes, shared their memories, and defended his name. In doing so, they've given the world a more complete picture of who Michael Jackson was beyond the music, the controversy, and the mythology. He was a brother, complicated and beloved, missed every single day,